Welcome to TechCentral's Impact Series. I'm Duncan McLeod. Now, if you're new to our shows, do check us out on YouTube at youtube.com/TechCentral. There you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and get all our latest shows, including this one, Impact Series, as well as TC Daily and Everything PC. Now, I'm thrilled to have Sascha Sauer, the CEO, or the head, what is it, CEO of
Audi South Africa.
Head of Audi South Africa.
Would be sufficient.
All right. In our studio now to talk about one of our favorite subjects here at TechCentral, and that's electric vehicles. And I was very fortunate, thanks to Audi, in the last week or so, to drive one of your very luxurious SUVs, at the e-tron 55 S-Line. Lovely vehicle, I must tell you. It felt like driving on a cloud. Is that the sort of reaction you're getting from your customers who are buying these vehicles? Or what's the sort of view out there?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to have this possibility today here with you. But yeah, to answer your question, that is very much what relates to my own experience, but also what I get as a feedback when people drive these cars for the first time, or even if they had a little bit of a previous experience with other models or other brands, that they feel that this car is a very mature and very well advanced piece of technology. And it's quite a stunning, I reckon you can attest to that, quite a stunning piece of engineering, actually.
Yes, quite incredible. And I was amazed with the review, not the review mirror, the wing mirrors, which were cameras, which then projected the view onto the side of the door. It's quite an interesting development. I've never seen that in a vehicle before. How have customers adapted to that?
Yeah, I think that takes a little bit of time. You may have noticed that probably yourself to adapt to the virtual mirrors, as we call them. And because your viewing angle is somewhat a little bit lower, because you need to look at the inside of the little screens which you have inside the door panels to see what's going on behind you. But once you get adapted to it, which takes a little, I'll say probably anything between a day or two, then I think you really have a big benefit, because they are not they're not so sensitive to rain, or in Europe probably to snow or anything, to fog, to mist. You always have a crystal clear picture. And the funny thing is also that for the first time ever, the passenger sees exactly what the driver sees, because you don't have that angle anymore of a mirror. So you really see what the driver sees when he looks into the mirror.
Good point. And I also like the fact that when you put the indicator on, it would warn you, it would go red if there was a vehicle obstructing the lane next to you, for example, which is
exactly that,
a very good safety mechanism. But I'm convinced the EV is the future of the car. It's a wonderful experience and brings many advantages to motoring. But are you finding consumers generally here in South Africa are warming to the idea, or are you finding there's still quite a bit of reluctance amongst the buying public about going electric, given some of the South African conditions, like, for example, load shedding?
Yeah, you're very right, and I think we need to be realistic about the situation here in South Africa. I think we're literally starting from zero as an industry where we are with this technology. There are challenges, no doubt about that, in this country, but I think none of them is really insurmountable. I think they can be overcome. And I mean, most likely I will always be confronted with the load shedding issue, and that is something we need to talk about for sure. But I think load shedding is a concept here in South Africa, which South Africans, being very resilient people, have learned to live with over the past couple of years, and to always make a plan. That's what I learned, what South Africans are very capable of, to always make a plan, to be flexible. And I think everyone has learned to live around it and with load shedding and make a plan around it. So we don't find ourselves in a situation where our PC or our batteries of the iPhone or your tablet computer would run flat without any electricity. So you always would charge them in the right time, and you work your schedule around the load shedding schedule typically. So that isn't really the big topic, especially when you consider that typically these modern cars have a range of anything between 350 and 450 kilometers already, depending on your drive style and the conditions they're in. But that means if you were to commute, let's say, 50 kilometers a day, you don't have to charge them every single day.
Yes.
You basically top them up when you come home, and you leave your home in the next morning, even if you had load shedding during the night, but it will always be full in the very next morning. So I think we need to put facts and figures into that equation, and to talk more based on facts and figures rather than emotions. and load shedding being a very emotional topic for many South Africans. I know that, and I had my own experience with that. But I think since the technology is very advanced and you can make a plan around it and you can charge your car at home typically as well as in public spaces, there isn't really a big concern. I'm not sure how you actually experienced, driving the car for a couple of days, if that was really a topic for you.
Not really. I didn't drive it for very long, but I didn't. And I guess you can just drive to an area or to a suburb where there's an EV station that isn't currently affected by load shedding. So yeah, you're right. South Africans are an ingenious lot. They'll get around some of these challenges. But they also have other concerns about EVs, and I'd like to get into that in some detail later in this discussion. And maybe you can put South Africans' concerns to rest because there are a few of them. But let's talk first about Audi's EV journey so far. When did Audi release its first electric vehicle, and what's the prognosis look like? Many motoring companies have said by X date we're going to stop manufacturing internal combustion engines. Has Audi made a similar forecasting commitment?
Yeah, I think that is something which Audi is very proud of. We publicly committed ourselves as a global company, as a global player, to only actually launch EV cars in the future, and that date being from 2026 onwards. Audi is going to only launch EV cars on the global market, so any new car launch will then be an EV car launch, which doesn't mean that we're going to stop by 2026 manufacturing and selling combustion engine cars.
Sure.
But anything which is in the market by that time will gradually phase out over the next, say, 7 to 8 years, normal product life cycle, into the 2030s, and I would say that probably specifically here in South Africa, we're going to see the last ICE combustion engine car being sold from the Audi brand, probably somewhere around 2033, 2034, depending on stock levels and availability, obviously. But gradually, the combustion engines will phase out, and so will the EV cars pick up over time, gradually, step by step. And yes, that's a global commitment of the Audi brand, 2026. That means in our business that is literally around the corner. So there's a lot of things to be done, to be prepared for from our side, because our business is a very complex business and we need to bear our consumers in mind, obviously. We need to take them on the journey with us, to educate them in the right way, to tell them and to give them the right reasons to believe and the facts and figures, and to position ourselves correctly and commit ourselves in the right way in the public space.
2026 is just around the corner, but just to clarify what you've said there, 2026 will be, you will not make any further announcements of new internal combustion engine vehicles, but models that have already been announced, you'll continue to manufacture those for a further period into the 2030s.
That's exactly right. So anything which is in the market by 2026 will obviously be sold until such life cycle of that product comes to an end. That could mean in an extreme case that a car was just launched, let's say beginning of 2026, it still has a 7 to 8 year life cycle, so that car would, phased out by 2033, 2034, somewhere around that time.
Okay. So Sascha, give us a flavor of what's coming from Audi in the EV space. Are you going to retool all of your existing vehicles to become EV equivalents, if you like? What's coming down the road, and what can South African Audi fans look forward to?
Yeah, very interesting question, and I get that a lot. Obviously, people are very interested in what's coming next, what's the next big thing. What I can tell you definitely is that over the years into the future, we will see the whole and entire portfolio to become electric. Audi has committed itself to be an electric car company only. So you can expect, generally speaking, that the entire portfolio will be electrified in the future. Now, when we launched our EV range at the beginning of this year, on the 22nd of February, we launched a whole fleet of cars already to show and demonstrate a clear commitment to this technology, but also to this country. And when we launched this car, we also committed ourselves to launch at least a new car every year from now on. So that means you're going to see a new car next year. You're going to see another new car being added to the portfolio in 2024. You will probably see another car in 2025, and so on thereafter. And it also means that, of course, you're going to see some cars in different segments with different body styles. You're going to see some sedan cars in the future. You're going to see more SUVs, which are very popular here in this country. And I'm very confident and I'm very positive about the future when it comes to this. Yeah, I've seen some exciting new products in Munich and in Germany recently during a business trip, and I have no worries about the future when it comes to our business.
Right, right. And what sort of conversations are you having with your customers? You have people coming into your dealerships looking, I'm sure, at these e-tron vehicles. What questions are they asking? Are they excited about EVs? What are your customers telling you here in South Africa?
Well, you would be surprised to hear that most of the customers we interact with, and some of them we have met ourselves with the management team already during some preview sessions which we had late last year, before the actual launch of the car, when we interacted with these individuals who were interested in our cars and in the technology. They are highly knowledgeable, highly educated about the technology. They know sometimes a great deal about the technology. Many of them have, in fact, gone off the grid at home. So they have installed power walls, they have installed inverters, they have installed solar panels at their home. Some of them, of course, run with generators also as a backup possibility at home. And they know a great deal about electric cars. So they are very knowledgeable. And I must admit that honestly, we were quite surprised to experience that, because we thought we really have to educate everyone from the start. But it is not really correct to assume that. Many people have a great deal of knowledge. And when they come to the dealership, they know exactly what they're looking for. They know their range. They know their commuting distance every day. So they know what they need. But they still want also that kind of security and safety net around them to know, where can I charge the car? How does it work? How does it work precisely at home? What comes with the car? Can you show me the charger, etc., etc.? What about the warranty of the car? What about the warranty of the battery? What is the life expectancy of the battery? All these questions are obviously very new to us, very new to the consumers, very new to our dealer and retail partners, obviously, but very relevant.
It must be nice having enthusiasts as customers, people who, I mean, these early adopters, I guess you could call them, tech savvy. They know your brand intimately already when they walk into the dealership. But it must make the conversation in one way challenging, but in another way rewarding for Audi.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really fascinating to interact with some of these individuals, and there were, I must say, most of them were really blown away by the performance of the cars, obviously, which is very instantaneously, and I'm sure you've experienced that yourself while driving the car. Some of them are simply very much interested in the design, the concepts of the car. Some are more on the technological side of the car. They're going to look at connectivity features of the car, the digital possibilities of the car, but also, you know, the engineering side of the car, little solutions of the car. And that is really an interesting conversation to have with these people. But you're right, most of them are early adopters, and they're very much petrol heads, and still they are very much into EV cars already. So that's quite interesting to observe.
Interesting to hear petrol heads.
There's a lot of learning in it for us as well, to be honest.
Yeah, interesting to hear that petrol heads are interested in EVs, because you kind of think, well, actually, no, they might want to stick with the older tech because of the sound and everything else associated with it. But you say petrol heads are interested in EVs now as well?
Well, yeah, they are, definitely. We have some former South African race drivers who we can call one of our customers. You may have heard of him, or you may hear of him very soon, I guess. Let's see what's coming our way on that side. But yes, it's true, and I consider myself a petrol head, and still I'm absolutely excited about electric cars, the way they deliver their performance, the way they perform on the road. And still they're so smooth and so, how shall I say, so convincing, and giving you so much comfort and, how shall I put that, so much...
It's, I mean, the performance when you put your foot down is just incredible.
This
it's just this
linear delivery of continuous the torque is
linear torque delivery all the way up.
Is just amazing, and I think that the driving experience is just a different one, but still very exciting to a normal combustion engine car.
Yeah.
And many people have said, once you've driven an electric car, you don't want to drive anything else anymore. And I must say, I can relate to that. Yeah. It really catches you.
It does. Yeah. The performance is wonderful, but at the same time, you feel bad about doing it because you're worried about the battery life, and you think, I'm going to enjoy this bit of performance now and going fast down this particular road, but but I might pay for it down the line in having to find a recharging station sooner than I might have liked. And I suppose you, as an EV driver, you have to balance that and know what you can do with the car. And if you're driving a long distance and you don't want to have to recharge all the time, then you're just going to have to take your foot off the pedal a little bit, which sometimes I guess can be challenging if you like the performance of the vehicle.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think I can relate to that too. But I think what a consumer must understand and get used to, and we need to learn about it also, is the driving pattern and driving style and the driving behavior when you're driving an electric car will change, and you will have to adapt a little bit over time to that different technology. It's responding far more sensitive to your driving style. And probably also the conditions the car's operated in. So it means you're going to see a faster drop in the range if you really give it a go.
Of course, yeah.
On the other hand, if you take it easy, you also see a stronger increase again in the range back in your display in front of you. You always, let's say, up to date what the car is capable of in terms of the range, what you have left, and when you need to recharge. When it comes to recharging, we've partnered with Grid Cars and set up some chargers already in the country. We promised at the beginning of the year, when we announced the partnership, that Audi is going to invest in some 70 different charge points across the country. And we were the first one actually to invest into DC 150 kilowatt chargers, which are currently the fastest chargers in the country. So really state-of-the-art technology, I would say. We've installed 4 of them already. We've installed another 5 80 kilowatt chargers, which our customers can use. Some of them cover the major roads along N1, N2, N3, and N4. Some of them in Richmond, for example, we even found a solution with a backup battery because there was simply not enough electricity supply from the public grid. Wow. So we have installed that charger, an 80 kilowatt DC charger, with the support of a backup battery, just to cover certain gaps for long-distance travel of our customers. So it is technically possible to do long-distance traveling already today. You can go all the way from Johannesburg here down to Cape Town and back again. Yeah. There are no concerns about that, actually. Yeah.
And those 150 kilowatt chargers, how long would it take to top up an SUV from Audi from flat?
Yeah, roughly. Well, let's assume the car you've driven has got, let's make it easy, it's not correct 100%, it's got a 95 kilowatt hour battery, but let's assume 100 kilowatt hour, and let's assume it was really, zero charge in the battery, which is also a very theoretical assumption. Then it takes anything between 30 to 40 minutes and you'll completely charge the car again. So I would say on a long distance journey and on a long distance road trip, that is, the time it takes you to have a smoke, to see the washrooms, have a coffee, stretch out a little bit, and you're good to go, and the car is, fully charged again.
And you won't, as you say, it won't be completely flat when you get to that.
Exactly.
To that charge point. Do you think that South Africa, the industry is rolling out EV charge points quickly enough? And what do you expect over the next few years? How rapidly are we going to have to see the deployment of charging stations across the country to match the anticipated sales of EVs in this market?
Well, when it comes to the number of charging at the moment in the country, actually, we could argue that we have enough chargers in the country already, considering the car park. Yeah, if you compare that with European levels, for example, we are probably even ahead of Europe, but it's just because it's a very large country here, and people like to do road trips, that we need to add some more chargers. So the number of the chargers is not necessarily the main concern. The main concern at the moment is charging time, and therefore the power of the chargers and the charger output of the power output of a charger, which we need to consider more. Currently, as we speak, we have anything between 350 and 400 chargers already installed in the country as a public charging network. Audi has contributed 33 chargers with some 70 plug points, so you can charge at any given time 70 cars in parallel, in theory, at the same time. And I can tell you that we're busy establishing another, let's say, 30 to 40 chargers. At the moment, we are in the rollout right now while we speak. So we are trying to commit ourselves in a way that we make a meaningful impact for consumers here, and that we really address the range anxiety which is still there, along with, you know, where can I charge the car along the way from A to B.
Yeah.
So the network is actually quite rapidly expanding, to answer your question very clearly. It is bigger than most people would think. If you start a conversation and you show people, you know, the actual charging network on a map, there are internet sites where you can check on the nearest charger. The car comes, of course, with built-in technology where you can find your nearest charger and different options around you or along the way. So only then people realize that actually there are far more chargers than they would think. And many people have probably not realized that maybe sometimes they pass a charger every day on the way to work.
And they don't realize it's there.
Yeah. They don't realize that there is a charger actually.
I mean, you've mentioned Joburg, Cape Town. I presume Joburg, Durban is well covered already.
Is covered as well, you're right.
As an EV driver though, if I wanted to take perhaps the long route to Cape Town through Uppington in the Northern Cape, is there infrastructure out there? Can you be adventurous in your driving, or do you still need to stick to the main routes if you have an EV?
Yeah, for now, you obviously always have to plan ahead. That's a little bit also the learning which and the adaptation which is needed as an EV driver. You will have to plan a little bit ahead where to stop, how far you can get with a certain charge,
right,
and where to stop for a charge. I think that is a little bit different for the time being. Yeah. Generally speaking, of course, if you plan your trip carefully and a little bit ahead, and you're using your app, you're using the features of the car, you can, you know, travel anywhere, basically. You just need to be considerate of the range, your driving style, and, you know, the nearest charge points to your location. Then I would say you could go, generally speaking, anywhere.
Yeah, but that'll change in time, and I suppose in a few years from now, every small town along the route will have some sort of EV charging infrastructure, right?
Yeah, I think it's going to happen, and if you consider the broader context we're in, today we've got mainly a car park made of combustion engine cars, but that is going to develop and over time, in the sense that more and more EV cars will add to this car park. So the engines, the Caltex, the Shells of this world will have to rethink their business model as well. And for sure, we know that there is some talks going on their levels as well about the future strategy and how to cope with EV cars in the future, and whether they would not have to add in terms of their portfolio also, you know, to cater for EV customers in the future. So if you were to consider that every petrol station today, every garage would also install some chargers, then you had a fully set up charging network immediately. And that's going to happen. I'm quite sure and convinced of that. It's a question of the next 3 to 5 years.
Sure. You mentioned your customers are tech savvy. These early adopters do their research. I presume a lot of them are looking at solar at home to charge their vehicles, or at the office where they're parked in the daytime, and that's free fuel for your car. Do you advise your customers at all on solar installations, battery installations at home and at the office, and how they can charge their vehicles that isn't tied to the Eskom grid or the EV stations that have been deployed around the country?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, my observation is that many of our customers, obviously not all of them, have gone off the grid. Yeah, that was very clear from our first interactions. They, as I mentioned before, they know a great deal about how much energy they're actually producing per day, how much they have excess, how much they could feed into a car, how much they could use for the car, how far it would, you know, carry them, and how much they could save on fuel, etc. All these questions were coming up, and they were not coming up from our side, but actually, you know, were addressed and thrown at us from the consumer side. But you're right. I mean, we are taking care about our customers when they are interested in buying one of our products. We have set up a service provider network, so they will do a home check, what we call a home check, to establish the precise individual situation at home, in order to find out what is the right solution in order to charge the car at home, what is feasible, technically speaking, and what is not possible, in order to also manage expectations of a customer and to be, you know, transparent and clear about that upfront. They will then also, you know, get a voucher from us to make changes at home, to install a charger if they want to. Every car comes with a Connect charger, as we call them. So it's not like the car would come like many of our modern products. You buy a device and you have to buy a separate cable, or, you know, in order to be able to charge it later on. We don't do anything like that. So the car comes fully equipped. You can charge the car anywhere, at home, at a public space. It has all the cables, all the technology. but we also support our customers in setting everything up at home with a external service provider.
Fantastic. So we've covered a lot of the issues or the concerns that South Africans might have about buying an EV in South Africa. The last one I just wanted to touch on, and you did mention it at the beginning of our discussion, was concerns about batteries. These cars have very expensive, large lithium-ion batteries in them. What sort of warranties does Audi provide to customers around those batteries, and how do you alleviate customer concerns? Because at the moment, EVs, I mean, their prices haven't come down into the sort of mass market yet. They're still largely a luxury item, quite costly, and I think there's a consumer worry that I might have to replace the batteries in 5 years. How much additional cost is that going to be? How does Audi help customers alleviate their concerns around battery life?
Yeah, it's a very relevant question, and which gets asked almost every single time, obviously, and I think it's understandable.
Sure.
We as an OEM, we have to commit ourselves clearly about that and need to be very open about that. I think first of all, I would like to address a certain misconception which is there sometimes. We're talking about a battery, which is correct, but to get it straight, it's not one piece of a battery.
Okay.
It's different modules. So which means you could access, if something was broken, if something was not working correctly, if you had an accident, let's say of a minor, hopefully only a minor one, you could access and change and exchange individual modules. So we're not talking always about exchanging the entire part of the car. You can, address that very in a very focused way, so to speak. That's, I think, very important to understand.
I didn't know that. Okay.
First of all, so that means you're far more flexible, and it doesn't necessarily mean that always a huge cost is related to replacing a battery. When it comes to the warranty, we sell our products with an 8-year warranty for the battery. And I think that demonstrates quite a confidence already in our product. We know from experience. Meanwhile, I mean, we're selling these cars for a couple of years in many markets around the world, and in the thousands. Meanwhile, that the battery life is even higher than we anticipated and than we expected. So that's a positive development. Obviously, the life expectancy of a battery depends on many factors. It depends on when you charge, how much you charge, where you operate the car, and which conditions. I mean, if you consider a battery being operated in Norway in very cold winters, it's probably very different to when the car's being operated down here in South Africa, where we have far more.
Batteries don't like heat, do they?
Well, they don't like extreme temperatures, I would say, either way of the scale. They don't like extreme cold, they don't like extreme hot weather. But anything in between, I think it's quite moderate around here. It can get very hot in South Africa, of course, in certain areas of the country. Yeah. But I would call it rather a favorable climate for a battery. Yeah. But also depends, of course, on your drive style and how you operate your car. But the battery is engineered to last at least, let's say, anything between 480 and 640,000 kilometers.
Wow.
Now, if you consider a 25,000 kilometer range, an average range, if you were driving 25,000 kilometers a year, that would give you anything between 12 to 15 years life cycle and expectancy for that battery. So I think from that side, we should be really covered. And I think the battery will last way longer than most people in our segment would keep their cars typically. Yes. So I think that is a lot of built-in security for a customer, a lot of safety when it comes to life expectancy. So I don't see any issues there. And if there are, then you can address certain modules and access them.
Oh, fantastic. And there's the warranty there as well. If
there's an 8-year warranty, so I think there's. I think we really tried hard to take away any hassle or any concern a customer may have.
Yeah.
The car comes with a warranty and a service maintenance plan as standard. People can, of course, opt out if they don't want that. The battery itself comes with an 8-year warranty, so I think we covered the public charging network. The car comes with an RFIQ card, so you can charge at any Critcast operated charger out there. It's even preloaded with a small amount of money, so you don't have to even worry to charge the card at first. So you just drive off the dealership and you're good to charge, good to go. You can charge and top up the car at home. So we're taking care of the home installation and the checkup at your home. So we try to address any potential concern a consumer may have when faced with this new technology, because we know something new always is of concern at first, and people are a little bit critical at first and very cautious also.
You mentioned your partnership with Grid Cars. Out of interest, I mean, there are other EV solutions in the market, some of them deployed by your competitors in the market. As an owner of an Audi, can I go to those other EV stations and use them in South Africa? Or are we going to end up with a situation in the country where you can only charge at certain EV stations? I mean, we've got in the banking industry, we've got the SASwitch network where you can go and draw money from any ATM, no matter if it's your bank or some other bank. Are we going to have a situation like SASwitch in South Africa, where maybe you pay a little bit more to power up your car from a rival's EV station? What are the agreements that are starting to be formed in the industry in that regard?
Yeah, I think in this regard, also this business is in an infancy. Let's face it.
Sure.
Currently, there is Grid Cars in the market. They own basically a monopoly when it comes to public charging network. Most of the chargers which you will see outside anywhere in the country are operated by Grid Cars, who provide the backbone to it and who service and maintain them, who make sure that they are online at any given time, etc., etc. This is the only operator at the moment. So we have partnered with them. But having said that, there are other players arising, and it's becoming more and more obvious that this is a future business model. And I mentioned before Shell, Caltex, the current petrol station and garage operators, they also start thinking about their future business model. Having said that, no matter what the chargers are branded with at the moment, you see some of our chargers which we help to install are branded with an Audi logo, but it doesn't mean that that only Audi customers can charge their car. So they welcome any brand, any model. So I don't want to name any other competitors here, but they can all be charged at our Audi branded stations, and we welcome them there absolutely, because we view it as a collaborative initiative still, even if that sounds a little bit weird at first. But I think if we want to develop this technology in this market, and if we want to develop the EV sector, we need to take this on board, and we also need to go this route and see our, let's say, social commitment here as well, and say, okay, if we install something, then it's for everyone. And that's exactly what we did. No matter what they're branded, you can always charge another brand.
Is that how it works in other countries, in Europe, for example?
It does typically. It does. You can charge your car. You've got your card. The car will be usable in any different charger, and then you pay as you go. The next big thing will obviously be to connect that to credit cards, also to be able to pay with your credit card. That's a little bit more on the tricky side with the banking system in the on the backbone, and data need to be managed very carefully when it comes to this. So, but that is definitely the next technology step on the charging side, to also make them credit card and banking card ready.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about after-sale service in the EV space. You're more of an expert on this than I am, but I understand that electric vehicles don't need as much maintenance as a vehicle with an internal combustion engine, don't have to be serviced as often. What happens in the back end? What happens in Audi's service network? You obviously have to train employees who work in that space. Is it a big project involved in doing this? Maybe just talk us through some of what's involved in the after-sales aspect of servicing EVs.
Yeah, that in itself is an entire ecosystem which we could now, dive into for probably an hour on its own already, because it is right what you're saying. The car, first and foremost, doesn't require as much maintenance and service as an internal combustion engine car. And I think if you look at the car technology-wise, it becomes very obvious. Just to name a very obvious thing, it doesn't need oil anymore. When you don't need oil, you don't need the filters anymore. There are not so many moving parts. You have less friction. You have less wear and tear on the car. You have in total less components as opposed to a combustion engine car. I think there is, generally speaking, then far less of a wear and tear to be observed in the car, which means you don't have to service the car that often. You don't have to service the car regularly. Every 2 years, that's about it, unless you experience any problems in between. And once you do service the car, there is less parts needed, obviously, and it's cheaper. Yeah, so it's more convenient. It's cheaper again. I mean, the electricity is already cheaper than the fuel. You save on the service and maintenance side as well over the years, and there might be, depending on your driving style, again a little bit more wear and tear to be expected on the tire side of the business, because these cars typically have a lot of torque, and if you give it a go every single time, of course, you might expect a little bit more wear and tear on the tire side.
I'd be in the tire shop every week, I suspect.
Yeah, but other than that, it's actually less of a concern. On the education side and the skill side of our network, of course, we had to train our dealers. We started off with 10 dealers in the country. They're all trained, and they had to be trained if they wanted to, operate that franchise and that business for us. So we made sure they're educated people. That's also important because we have high voltage systems in the car. So it's also out of safety and security for, the personnel working on the car, that we need to train and educate them properly. Because it could have devastating effect on an individual if they touch the wrong parts and don't know how to operate the car safely. Having said that, that also brought up the topic of first responders to us, because we thought like, okay, what if things go wrong? What if the car is involved in an accident? And who is then going to attend to the car? And how about these people? Do they actually know how to operate the car? Do they know how to approach a car? Do they know how to attend to a fire in an electric car? What to do and what better not to do? So we started investigating that space a little bit. And I'm glad to say that we were the first ones to pick that up actually in the market and in this country. And by doing so, we partnered, and we were the first to actually train and educate 70 first responders in the entire country, who went into their municipalities and then went on training their peers again, to make everyone aware how to safely operate a car if it's involved in a crash and an accident, what to do, what to look out for, how to operate it, and the main to-dos and not to-dos. So that's what we did on our own cost, just to also spread the news and the knowledge in an entirely different environment, so to speak, which we thought is important and need to be addressed as well. So outside of our real own network. Okay.
But given how the servicing needs of these vehicles change compared to ICE vehicles, what does that mean for your traditional motor plan? Does it look radically different now?
Of course, the calculation of a motor plan will look different from the calculation of a motor plan for a combustion engine car. Again, there are no spark plugs, there are no filters, there's no oil filter, there's no oil needed. But that's factored in, so these service maintenance plans come cheaper, for sure, as opposed to an equivalent ICE engine car. But other than that, there's no real magic behind it. I mean, you need to calculate what the car might consume and need over a 5-year period. That's how we sell the car. Our offer includes a 5-year service maintenance plan, hassle-free for the customer again. I have to emphasize, customer can opt out nowadays and say, I don't want that service and maintenance plan. I'm going to pay individually each and every service. Fine, you can do so. But our initial offer includes everything for the next 5 years, including a full-fledged warranty on the entire car.
And financing options around EVs, are they the same as ICE vehicles, or are there differences there as well?
Well, we're still in the process of working out the right offer there, because we observed at the beginning, and that's a learning for us as well, most of our customers so far are what we refer to as cash customers. They either pay really in cash, or they have their own private financing options available. Okay. But going forward, I think it is very relevant that we also look into a product like a guaranteed future value product, for example, in order to allow for financing over a 3 or 4 year period, with the choice for the consumer at the end of the 3 or 4 year period, whichever suits them most, or even 2 years. to hand the car back at a guaranteed future value, or carry on financing it, or swap it for another car and financing that car again. So it's maximum built-in flexibility.
Okay. I want to talk about a subject that's perhaps become quite contentious in the South African market, and that's the taxes that are levied on EVs. And I know many industry players, including industry lobby groups and associations, have been speaking out quite vocally on this subject, particularly in the last few months. But there's a lot of concern that EVs are taxed in South Africa fairly significantly higher than internal combustion engine vehicles. What is your view on this current situation, and in your view, what needs to happen?
Yeah, and in fact, it's true, to make that statement up front. Unfortunately, as we speak, we still see a higher taxation on an EV car as compared to an ICE combustion engine car. Just to give you a clear example, an ICE combustion engine car is being imported at a tax or a duty rate, shall I say, of 18%. An EV car comes into the country being taxed on the duty level at 25%. Now, that is not the only difference, but because you have taxes on taxes on taxes in this country, and VAT and ad valorem taxes, that makes that 7 percentage points of a difference on the duty level quite a substantial difference when it comes to the retail level for the consumer. So that is a concern for us, because in most other countries in the world, obviously, governments have adopted an approach where they incentivize the adoption of EV cars and the sales and the buying of EV cars. At the moment in this country, it's the opposite, unfortunately, still. But having said that, we know that the Minister Patel, for example, himself is working on a green paper, has issued a green paper to work on a fast adoption rate of EV cars in the future, which can only be achieved if prices are being brought down. The government has come to the party, or need to come to the party, in order to lower duty and taxation rates and find other ways and mechanisms of incentivizing the EV cars. That's very clear.
So there have been some suggestions that maybe EV cars should just have the same rules or the same taxes as ICE vehicles. But in many markets around the world, EVs are given greater tax incentives than ICE vehicles because of the move to reduce carbon emissions, etc., etc. In Audi South Africa's view, what should we be seeing in South Africa in terms of incentives related to EVs?
Well, yeah, I mean, if I could come up with a wish list, I had a lot of ideas, obviously. But I think you're right. First and foremost, we should aim at least an equalization on the duty level. That would be probably be the bare minimum. You can't explain to people why they should buy an EV car and why this is the future, and then, from a government point of view, you're charging them higher. So I think at least an equalization there would already be a good step forward and a step in the right direction. There are countries in the world which have other mechanisms in place. Of course, there are kickbacks which really, cash payouts to the customer once they bought the car and registered the car and handed in all the paperwork. But I think you mentioned one very important aspect. It's not only about the consumer itself. Of course, the consumer always wants to buy a car at the cheapest possible rate. Let's face that. But there's also a broader context to it, which is that this government and this country has committed itself as well and signed the Paris Climate Agreement. So there is also an international expectation on South Africa as a country to, achieve their global CO2 emissions and targets. And you need to start somewhere, and that is in the automotive industry definitely true, but it holds true also in other industry. And I had a nice chat this morning with a gentleman I went to breakfast with, and he's in real estate, and we were very clear that also buildings need to become more efficient, for example, right? At the moment, we're not really thinking about the buildings and the efficiency of buildings, talking solar panels, but how you power these buildings, how you insulate these buildings, how you operate that. So from that perspective, it's a far broader discussion to be have.
Are you confident, though, that we're going to see some movement on the taxation issue in South Africa in the near term? Are you confident in your discussions with government and industry discussions with government that you're being listened to and that something's going to happen?
Definitely the government and the governmental bodies are listening, definitely. Yeah. I think it's not an easy decision. I think it's a major impact also on the government and on the budget side, so they need to get the financing side of it right as well, and I understand that, and it's appreciated. However, I also think, you know, being on the other side of the business, we need to move a little bit faster. Yeah? It's taking a little bit too long. I think we can accelerate a little bit. I think all the facts and figures have been exchanged. The data is on the table. I think the future is electric. Everyone has hopefully understood that well, meanwhile. And again, if you look at it from a different angle and a little bit broader, then you need to establish also South Africa has a production hub, an international production hub. We are exporting cars into various parts of this planet, and currently we are exporting ICE combustion engines. Now, but if more and more markets around the world are closing ICE combustion engines, or the markets for ICE combustion engines, let's take UK, 2030, they're not going to allow any more registration of ICE combustion engine cars. The question then arises, where do you export your cars to? So it brings with it unavoidably the question and the discussion point, what are we gonna, as an industry, what are we gonna produce in the future in South Africa to maintain the 5 to 6% GDP contribution, which the sector currently contributes to annual GDP, to ensure all the employment and all the jobs which are created in the entire automotive industry in South Africa.
This is an urgent discussion that needs to happen now, not in 2030 when the deadline hits. We have to make the decisions now because these factories have to be retooled. These are things that take years, right?
That's absolutely right, Duncan, and that's why I emphasize we need to speed up a little bit. It might feel like, yeah, 2030, that's long away, but again, in our business, it's literally around the corner. That's a car life cycle from now, and we're there, 2030. And we cannot make the decision and take the changes in 2030. You're very right. It needs a lot of investment, and it needs a lot of preparation, and it needs economies of scale. That's why you're also talking about export and the local market. So we need to develop both elements in parallel. And we need to stimulate local sales and adoption of EV cars also in order to maintain production hubs in order to be able to export in the future again. And the decisions must be taken now, because you need to prepare the product portfolio, a whole factory. You need to invest and get going.
More urgency needed. Before we wrap, and this has been a fascinating discussion, by the way, Sascha, but before we wrap, I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball and tell me what the mobility market is going to look like in South Africa beyond just electric. What do you think? How is we've seen so many predictions about flying taxis and you know, the way mobility is just going to be revolutionized. We've seen the rise of e-bikes, for example, which have become very popular. But where do you think mobility is going, and what is it going to look like in the South African context in the next, say, 8 years?
Yeah, I think we must emphasize we look at it from a South African point of view and put it in a South African context, because, you know, electric scooters and bikes is good and nice, but I'm living in South Africa and I'm not sure if I would be riding a electric scooter through the city of Johannesburg at nighttime, let's say.
Sure.
So I think there are some specific situations here and challenges in the market, which in this country, which we need to consider when we talk about that. But when we think about the future, I see it definitely electric. I think that is a given. Meanwhile, it's an electric future and an electric mobility. But I see it highly connected, with lots of digital elements attached to the car, to the device. The car becomes more of a device, a true mobile device, if you like, a mobility device.
It's the ultimate gadget, really.
It becomes an ultimate gadget. It's going to offer you additional space and additional freedom. And having said that, it's probably also attached to autonomous driving, the next big thing in my mind. You know, once we see 5G technology being available throughout the country and in all countries, we're going to see more autonomous driving possibilities arise. And I think that is the ultimate future mobility concept for now. An electric car which drives autonomously is 360-degree connected to its outside world. And I think that is really a fascinating view and a fascinating thought from my point of view, because it's going to offer you completely a different possibility when driving the car or being driven in your car. You know, you can relax, you can have meetings, you can be productive suddenly being in your car, and the car does the job. Yeah? So I think that is an amazing future. That is a very exciting future in my mind, and that's a future I'm really looking forward to.
Sascha, this has been a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for coming into the TechCentral studio. Sascha Sauer is head of Audi South Africa. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Duncan. It was a pleasure talking with you and exchanging about exciting ideas, exciting technology, and the future of mobility in South Africa.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.